biggest leadership challenge is actually not the tech itself. It's the changing of the workflows. That is really the longest pole and the most important one.
What has been the biggest leadership lesson that you have carried regarding AI?
I actually think that part of what leaders need to be really crystal clear on is
AI is reshaping everything, from how we build products to how we lead. So in this episode, I sit down with Chris O'Neill, former CEO of Evernote and now CEO of GrowthLoop, to unpack what it really takes to lead in the era of AI. You will learn why mindset matters more than tools and how to scale innovation without losing your culture, and what the best CEOs are doing right now to stay ahead of the curve. So this is your playbook for leading through the next wave of disruption. So believe me, this is an episode that you don't really want to miss. Ready? Let's go.
What impact AI will have on the future of work, how leaders can get clear in terms of what roles and skills are required for the future.
it's the ability to basically lean into the uncertainty, knowing that you're going to get some things right and some things wrong. As long as you're not risking the company, figure out how to not make that mistake the second time. That's the recipe to go forward to accelerating compounding learning. I don't know of any company that wouldn't want someone who is incredibly proficient and fluent in all things AI. And yet it is really a leadership challenge and opportunity trying to shrink the fear by providing the tools for people to embrace AI in everything they do.
There are a number of CEOs out there that want to embrace AI. However, they don't have technology CEO background, but they still need to drive that change. How do you do that with that challenge?
It usually boils down to two or three things.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to a new episode of the World Class Leader Show. And I'm very, very excited today to have with me Chris O'Neill. Chris is a purpose-driven global technology CEO and Fortune 500 board director, passionate about driving growth and transformation with AI and data. You know, what a better topic than that for this episode. So Chris is currently the CEO of GrowthLoop, where he's helping redefine the future of marketing. We'll have time to speak about that. He's also a seasoned executive with 25 plus years of leadership experience. Chris previously served as the CEO of Evernote, and most of us have used it before, Chief Business Officer of Glean, and Managing Director of Google for Canada. He's also a board director at Gap and an investor in and advisor to several AI companies. Chris is also known for leading organizations through pivotal transformation, and that's one of the major topics of the conversation we're going to have today. And Chris brings a pragmatic and yet forward-thinking lens to the evolving intersection of AI, data, and marketing. So whether building enduring teams or pioneering new technologies categories, Chris is passionate about helping leaders embrace innovation with clarity and conviction. What a great tool and what a great guest. Chris, thank you so much for being on the show today.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Andrea.
Chris, so first of all, I'm very curious. By the way, congratulations with such a great experience that you had. And it sounds like...
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. You're, super impactful in the work that you have done. And I can see, we had a chat earlier, your passion is clear, is evident. And I'm sure in this episode, it will show up in how we're going to talk about AI and leadership, which to me, honestly, is one of the most interesting intersections, given that it's also potentially a dichotomy that many people have in their mind. Is it people or AI? So leadership comes, inside of that. But before we get to your journey, tell us a little bit more about GrowthLoop.
Yeah, so GrowthLoop helps marketers grow faster and easier. What we've realized is the application of AI on top of your first-party data allows you to understand how you can grow better and faster, right? So if you think of the concept of a growth loop, you have an idea to improve a company. It could be drive lifetime value, or it could be a category specific revenue target, or reducing churn. Like, how do you then decompose that into growth itself? So we help companies break it down into the individual parts. We apply AI at every step of the way, and also to stitch the different steps of growth together, all by applying AI to your data, the data that you have with your loyal customers. So it's about making delightful, personalized experiences that ultimately lead to growth faster. So we're having fun. We're on the right side of many impressive transformations like AI and the rise of these data clouds. And we're really fortunate to have a lot of impressive companies and brands that we support.
Yeah, and I'm sure so many people already, they will probably Googling. And if they don't already, the company, of course, they will already Google and see, what is in behind that. Chris, and interesting, you are in the Bay Area. So you're not one of those founders or leaders of technology that decided to move elsewhere in the US. You're still pretty much love the California, the Bay Area as the place for making things happen.
So I'm originally born and raised in Canada. I've spent about half my life in small towns in Canada and Toronto, and then the other half here in the Bay Area. And it's an amazing place, both to live. It's a complicated place, but in terms of innovation, it's really been at the center of so many different transformations over the years, from the dot-com era. Now, of course, the AI revolution is really happening, and it's ground zero for it. So it's an interesting place. There's a lot of talent density here. So a lot of the biggest innovators happen to spend time here. It's not unique in that, by the way. Like, there are other places in the world that are doing incredible stuff. But I have enjoyed it. It's been a fun place to raise 2 kids with my lovely wife. And it's a really neat place, personally and professionally. So I've been fortunate.
That's great. So thank you. So it's always a question I ask to those people that are living, especially the founders that live in California, how they experience California based on what we hear from the other side of the world about people moving to Austin or New York or other areas in the US. Chris, so let's have a look to your leadership journey. You've been in technology, if I'm not mistaken, essentially the entire life, because we haven't discussed or shared all your previous experience. I mean, you've been around for so many years as well, but clearly you have been in technology. That's your space, that's your world, that's your experience. And you have led companies, given the context where you operated in, from Google to Evernote and now GrowthLoop, as you said. So what has been probably the biggest leadership lesson that you have carried, and more specifically regarding AI, the new era of AI? Because you started to work with organizations where at that time AI was not yet a thing. And then all your work now is showing up in the AI. So how that worked for you?
Yeah, I would say it usually boils down to 2 or 3 things. And any successful company has to be clear about the problem they're solving and the benefits that they unlock. And it's really interesting. You talk about the Valley. Oftentimes when I found people get astray, it's because they're actually not really solving a problem, right? Yeah, it's a really interesting technology in search of a problem. So I'd say number 1 is you really have to solve a real problem. Number 2, once you figure out some product market fit, it all becomes about distribution, right? How do you get it in the hands of people, make people aware that your solution is in existence and is much better than the alternatives? And then above all else is the team, right? There's a term, the company, the team you build is the company you build. And I found that to be true in every situation, whether that's a hard turnaround, whether it's, trying to scale something up from the very beginning, or whether it's just to try and take a market. It really does come down to the quality of the team, the cohesivity of the team, the ability to be clear on the problem you solve and the business you're creating, and then communicate like heck so that everyone can stay on more or less on the same page, especially true in a dynamic market where things are changing, in this case, almost every week, if not every day. So those are the 3 things. So it's like, are you solving a real problem? Once you've solved, at least established some fit, are you able to take the market through distribution? And then are you building the best, most cohesive team that's possible? Those are the things that have served me well in every situation I've ever been leading through.
Yeah, and it makes totally sense to me. I'm interested to see whether, by the way, what you shared are, we can say, in our own words, it could be like key principles for transformation and for success for organization. I think that's what you are embodied in your way of operating as a CEO. I just interesting to see whether the AI world or the AI era I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on the 3rd element, the team. So you still need to have a very strong performing team to drive that. But do you feel like in the AI era, the first 2 principles that you share, clarifying what solution you are providing and creating a product fit, applies differently in AI compared to any other technology products or solution?
So I actually do think it does impact the team. I'll just touch on that briefly. Is that part of what I see is even individual contributors are managers now. And what do I mean by that? I mean, think of it as like having 1,000 interns in the form of agents, right? And so even individual contributor developer, is going to have need to set context for these agents, to set clear expectations, to provide context, to provide feedback. So in an interesting way, I believe everyone becomes a manager and a leader. So it's a small nuance, but it's an important one, because I think that's really the mindset that one needs to have, especially as we think about it. I'm sure we'll get into this, the tension that exists between jobs that will just clearly disappear and the fact that almost all jobs will transform in interesting ways. I think on the product market fit thing, one of the most fascinating things and counterintuitive to me, really, it's very clear to me that developers were going to see this as a huge lever almost instantly, right? So the ability to have a copilot to code, to remove some of the mundane aspects of coding. In the early days, I was just blown away. I sometimes, as I said, invest and advise, it's very small companies. And I remember this one company we had 1.5 developers. It was two brothers, and they were producing code that was like the quality and the quantity was like surpassing teams which were literally 100 times their size, like literally 100. And I was like, how is this possible? And he showed me. I sat beside him to watch him code, and it was just astounding. He was just using these copilots and these coding products to basically AI coding products to change. So I saw that. But the counterintuitive one is more like non-technical people can get to prototypes quickly. Right. So the concept of having to write up things, do all this research to have a hypothesis to translate it into like a working prototype wireframe, that's all collapsed to zero, right? You can basically have an idea and you can basically create a working prototype to test out something so much faster. So the whole concept of compressing the time and the journey to have something there, also known as product market fit, is astoundingly great. And on the other side, with distribution, there's more ways to do smoke tests or basically get out messages using AI tools to stitch them together to say, hey, is this message resonating, right? I could give you a quick example with how we thought about positioning GrowthLoop, right? We actually used the technology underlying Notebook LLM to test different narratives, different ways of expressing our value in a way that couldn't be possible before. So we're using synthetic personas and a bunch of different messages to see which of them resonated. So there's all sorts of new toolkits, and it's a different mindset that says, hey, you're not going to have to go through like 10 or 20 step processes to test whether you have something that has merit from a product market fit. And then on the other side, once you have it, there's new and interesting, exciting ways to test to say, hey, how do you create awareness? How do you therefore position your product using the right terms and the right phrases that resonate in a way that solves real problems for real business leaders? So I think it's just a new era where you're applying tools to those fundamental things like, do I have product market fit? Once I do, can I go take the market? And then how do I think about managing a team in this era? And it's fun, it's ever changing, but those who lean into it, I think, are going to be the ones that, like anything, pull apart away from the pack, if you will, and separate the best from the rest.
Yeah, and it's such a great insight, Chris, because I was really reflecting on what you just shared. And it sounds like, at least that's what I was left with, that given that the road to market has changed, I mean, from an AI product to other sort of technology product, and the response that is required from people in team has to be different. I think most important to me, at least, sounds like there is a shift in mindset, how people, they're going to do their job as developers, as people working in AI, because they need to be able to, sounds like at least, operate in a different way than what maybe they did in traditional technology environment. And you cannot operate in a different way until you started to see a different perspective and shift your way of thinking. Is that true? You see that as the mindset shift is a necessary component of working in an AI right now?
It's a great insight, Andrea. It does start that way. I have a lot of admiration for Toby, the founder at Shopify, and he wrote a pretty seminal memo. And memo, that's interesting. But the term that I love is they've gone from a memo to a movement, where it's really inculcated. It's really become part of the fabric of that company, and there's many examples of that. But it starts with a mindset that says, hey, we're going to expect this. We're going to make it easy to access the tools. That's obvious, but that's actually surprisingly not that effective. It has to be a mindset, and it has to be reinforced, and it has to be intentional. Unlike anything in business, right? If you want something to happen, you have to be clear about what you want. You have to be intentional about it, and then you have to set the expectation that is not optional, right? And that's true with AI. So, someone did say this. I'll get it roughly right. Said, look, about half of what I've known has become virtually valueless, but about 20% of what I know has become 20 to 100 times more valuable. What that means is, a lot of the rote, kind of like lower value added tasks can be done better by agents now, today, like right now. However, the context setting in figuring out which problems to solve and how to creatively frame it, that's what becomes 100 times more effective. You have to just acknowledge this. The simplistic, okay, my job's going to go away, or it's this or that. That's not helpful, right? I mean, that makes for good headlines. But ultimately, leaning into this and understanding how this can be a lever, how you can remove some of the mundane stuff, right? To really focus on the things that uniquely humans can do, only humans can do. That's the value. That's the mindset. In allaying some of the fears that people have naturally, that there's going to be change, because ultimately the biggest leadership challenge is actually not the tech itself. It's the changing of the workflows. It's the changing of the work itself that is really the longest pull, and the most important one. I think is going to take many years for us to fully make that happen. I think the companies and the leaders that are able to do that are going to, again, be the ones that really pull away. And that's ultimately a leadership challenge, to basically shrink the change, but make sure that the underlying work changes, so that you don't just apply a new technology to the old workflows. Like that's what we see all the time right now. And you'll get some efficiencies, but ultimately the unlock becomes when you actually think about it from first principles, and you actually then change the underlying work, right? And we see this in marketing all the time. It's like, if you want to just kind of simulate and replicate old direct mail era interactions with loyalty campaigns and so forth, I mean, you're going to get some benefit, but ultimately you're going to just lock yourself into the previous mindset. So it has to change, and that's a leadership challenge.
Oh, that's great. So wonderful insight. I'll come back to change, because that is, to me, I'm interested to understand how to drive that change in organizations. Because what you just shared, and I mean, you shared as well. I mean, you are a technology leader, so clearly it comes natural for you to live, understand AI. I wouldn't say that's easy. I'm just saying it might become much more natural based on your experience. But there are a number of CEOs out there, they want to embrace AI. They can clearly see the value and the impact that can have on productivity, for example. However, they are not coming, they don't have your background or other CEO, technology CEO background, but they still need to drive that change. They want it, they're interested, but they don't know how to do it. They don't understand the technicalities of AI, but then they need to go to the board and talk about AI. They need to go to the media and talk about AI. I remember one large corporate organization I worked for I wouldn't draw either names or industry, but she was really keen to transform her organization into an AI-driven organization, but she didn't have the clue. And then she trusted her own team, but then nobody was clear understanding. So anyway, the point is, how can really a CEO, will admit publicly, sorry, I don't know anything about AI, for example, but I can see the value, and I don't have the answer. My team maybe will have, but I still need to provide clarity and direction. Because at the end of the day, you are in charge, and people are expecting that you are in control, and you know what to do next with AI. How do you do that, with that challenge?
It's a fascinating topic, and you're kind to say that it comes naturally. It comes naturally, perhaps because we've made a lot of mistakes, and judgment is formed by making mistakes and learning from them. And that's just part of the mindset I think that leaders need to have, is like, you learn by making mistakes. Like, not intentionally, of course, but you learn by doing a lot of things, and sometimes you get them right, and sometimes you get them wrong. So my comfort with trying new things and leaning into these things is like the benefits of doing so far outweigh the risks of basically maybe masking your ignorance or masking your lack of knowledge on something, right? So I've just trained myself to basically lean into that. And it is not altogether too different from when I was a first-time CEO and I never hired a CTO. I had a wonderful coach at the time. Her name's Kim Scott. She's written, Radical Candor and a number of other incredible books. And her advice was so good. It's like, she said, "Hey, Chris, I get it. Why don't you go and find 10 of the best CTOs that will give you their time and ask them what makes them great, or what makes a great CTO." So I did that. And I just literally went and talked to 10, maybe it was 8 or 9. I can't remember precisely, but I just took a lot of notes, and I distilled what made a great CTO, because I'd never done that. And then I was able to go hire a great CTO. And I can even, to this day, I could tell you like the 4 or 5 things that really mattered. And and I bring that up as an example because it's not too dissimilar here, is go out and talk to people, right? I give this advice to my children, right? You don't know what you're going to do in your career. Go talk to people who are 5 or 6, 7 years down the road and ask them what they like about their job. What do they not like about their job? What are they worried about? It's the same thing here. So it's go out and find people who are further down the track, who are clearly demonstrating value from applying AI to specific business problems. And I say that very intentionally because the vast majority is what I was describing before is really very unique and exciting technology applied in search of a problem. So find a problem that's being solved by AI and go and watch and learn, right? And then start experimenting yourself, right? Just the other week, my son was curious about these type of questions. He's 19 years old. He loves photography. So I said, hey, Jack, why don't we vibe code this weekend? And he's like, Dad, what are you talking about? Anyway, we sat down for a few hours and he vibe coded a freelance photography website, right? In a couple hours. So to me, it's just about having, back to your point about mindset, having the willingness to know you're going to fail along the way, make it okay for you to fail, but have the curiosity and tenacity to go try it yourself, right? Go do things yourself, but also talk to people who are further down the track, right? Who have demonstrated some level of innovation in an area you're interested in. And I think you'll find, and this is one of the things that the Valley does really well, by the way, it's like really this concept of paying it forward. People will take time with each other to really offer perspectives. Often when there's nothing really specific to gain, it's just a sharing of mindsets and experiences. So I think it's something that the Valley gets right. So those are my thoughts on this. Like, it really takes curiosity and really like a little bit of humility to just kind of jump in and try and know you're going to fail along the way, but you're going to learn.
And I think is building what you said, which I totally agree on, is I would add probably the word vulnerability, because what you explained is an example of vulnerability to yourself, but also to the people around you. And that's why I think where it gets interesting, because not all the CEOs, they're demonstrating the level of vulnerability. So they might, come from a place of status, ego. So they will never admit publicly, for example, they don't know enough, and then they need to learn, etc. So that's one thing. The other thing is interesting from what you said is it does also require that CEOs, which I think is something that sometimes I feel is a constraint they're creating for themselves. They're operating in a bubble, and operating in the bubble inside their own organization. There, first, it doesn't allow them to see what's happening outside. But then second, kills the level of curiosity you're just saying, because you get so much trapped into your own organization challenges or what you see, which becomes one single perspective. You're losing the focus of what's happening outside.
So much resonates in there. And you talk about vulnerability, right? I mean, part of one gathers as you travel through your career is like, look, I've had high highs and low lows, and you have to lead with vulnerability. You have to just like lay it out there. It's you're very kind about lots of things they've done, and looks, like the highlight reel of one's career looks great, but like it's like there's a lot of like ups and downs in there, and big failures and big wins. But building teams, as you know, in your line of work, it starts with vulnerability, right? Trust is only formed by being real and being open and being vulnerable. So 100% on that. And I think that's not just true about willingness to embrace something like AI. It's true about everything, right? Like you just have to be vulnerable as a leader, and like I think that makes trust possible. The other part is the bubble inside a company. Like part of the reason I'm enjoying being in a smaller environment is it's less like a bubble, right? You're out there, making contact with real humans, real customers, real prospects every day. I love that. There's none of this like hiding and doing in the ivory tower and doing PowerPoints. I'm done with that era of my career. So it is very much about getting out there and really getting exposure, both to the team and certainly to customers. So that's how real learning happens. It's harder, I admit, in a fully remote environment where you don't get the feedback quite as viscerally and as real. But you find other rituals to bring it in. I haven't quite figured all that out, to be really clear, but it is very much requires extra effort. But ultimately, get out of the bubble and really make it okay for the team to really know that, when you start down this road, developing on the frontier of AI is really difficult, right? It's like, it's an ever changing, the models are changing, but the slope of the improvement is so impressive, but it makes for difficulties to actually develop products in this era on the frontier of an ever changing technology. Now, I'm excited about it, and we're making it happen, but boy, it's bumpy.
So, in talking about different perspectives, so there is one perspective is excitement about AI, all that will drive in terms of performance, opportunities. I mean, it's crazy. Just yesterday, I got a company that I wasn't even aware of from AI. He offers, I mean, such an interesting product I never even considered before. So that is an incredible opportunity out there, and that is clearly, it's clear for everybody. But the reality is also then we have many organizations, I would say primarily medium, large organizations, they are now in transition to AI, or at least they are embedding AI in their own way, either as a pilot or as a rollout. And they have to deal with people that are really, whatever is their inner voice at the moment is, and maybe again, that is a construct, that maybe the media are exaggerating, don't know. But clearly you will have a view. But most of the inner voices out there for employees is, why do I need to drive such a massive change and transformation about AI when whatever I'm going to produce will actually impact me and my job and my future, et cetera, et cetera. So the fear I feel is real, not the same for every organization, for people. But if you put yourself in a CEO shoes and now you have to communicate, how you're going to drive that change, how would you address that fear that is in people's mind?
Yeah, it's real. And you can't pretend it doesn't exist. You have to lean in and understand it. And then some of the things I was referring to earlier is, it's not an option to be fearful and pull back from this. That's a recipe for failure, like almost by definition. So, it's about leaning in. It's about being clear with the team that this is something that is expected of every person. So one of the more innovative things we're experimenting with is, like in different functions, you have these things called job ladders, and people use different terms for them. So we're experimenting with actually having a job ladder for AI, which is clear about setting the expectation in the development side or on the marketing side or on the go-to-market team. Like, what does proficient look like and what does mastery look like? And being very explicit about that. And now even bringing it into career conversations to say, like, this is like, we're doing this and we're being intentional about it. So part of it is setting that expectation, right? That we are doing this and we're going to provide access, and it's going to be a good thing for your career, even though it might impact the day-to-day work of what you do. I'm of the belief that it's going to open up many other opportunities that we can't even foresee just yet. And there's a little bit of a leap of faith that requires trust. It requires leaning into the unknown. But it does start with setting that expectation. It does start with basically providing the tooling and then providing the coaching to make it a key part of everyone's job. And so I don't think there's any other way around it. It's a similar conversation I have with my children as well, right? One's in first year of college and university. The other's just in her last year of high school. And it's like, there's a really active debate, and I think it is really important debate in society about, okay, if we remove a lot of the entry-level jobs, how are we going to see the next generation of our world, of our workers thrive? I don't have all the answers by any stretch of the imagination. Now, I do know that my counsel is be so good they can't ignore you, become super powered with these tools, because I don't know of any company, I do not know of one that wouldn't want someone who is incredibly proficient and fluent in all things AI. So that is true. And yet it is really a leadership challenge and opportunity around fear and basically trying to shrink and reduce the change and the fear by providing the tools, providing expectations, and providing a clear, path, if you will, for people to embrace AI and everything they do at work. So that's my best thinking on it. But again, it's evolving very quickly, and it's understandably a very human challenge.
Yeah. And look, to me, I just want to appreciate that you appreciate that the fear exists versus, just disregard it. So I think it's great that, we are having this conversation, and that doesn't necessarily solve the problem. But I think it's the more we talk about it, I think it's fair, because that's where people are. And I always say to leaders, always meet your people where they are, not where you are. That is to give you
Yeah.
better context about what
It's
people
great
are
advice.
operating from, right?
Yeah.
Great. So talking about that, an implication on career. So another important, which is so much connected, related conversation that is happening in organizations right now is about future roles, future skills, future roles. So what the impact AI will have on the future work, generally speaking, right? And it has an implication in terms of workplace, no workplace, how much work you're gonna do remotely. But that's not the conversation I'm interested to bring with you. I'm more interested in terms of how leaders can get clear in terms of what roles and skills are required for the future. Because again, that's another thing where, in my experience, at least in many organizations, CEOs and leaders, they get trapped inside of that because from one hand they see what can be, but then they look at their current organization as it is and say, gosh, there is a massive gap between what I have and what I should be. But what if I transform my entire organization, I reskill people, or I change completely my workforce, and then I realize I was wrong choice or term because things are going in a different direction, and I need a skill then I don't have anymore. So as a result of that, people are concerned about making that tough decision. So what they do, most of them, not everybody, but most of them, they postpone that decision until they feel like it's going to get clear. And as you know, it will never be clear. So we are going living in uncertainty all our, next 10, 20 years. So what's your take on that? Sorry for the long context and question.
If as a leader you wait to get something more like 60 or 70% of the data, you've waited too long, right? Like our job as leaders, as CEOs, is we're always dealing in the realm of uncertainty, right? Like there's no such thing as certainty. There's no such thing as easy. If the problems were easy, they wouldn't get to your desk. It's just kind of like I take it as a give it. Okay, great. Then the mindset. Back to your point about mindset. The words I tend to use in a variety of things is think big. Start small and go fast. Okay, what do I mean by that? Right? Think big is like think about the opportunities that we're going to unlock. Start small means like don't try to change it all at once. Like pick one thing. And my advice is to think something that is a system, an end-to-end loop. Right? That's it could be very small. It could be like a marketing campaign. It could be how you ship code on one feature. Whatever it is, try to think of an end-to-end loop and then optimize the heck out of it. Right? By using AI, right? So it's not about changing everything. It's not about changing a product launch for one of your flagship products. It's not about how you interact with customers day to day. Pick a small part of one of the things, but it's an end-to-end loop. And then what you're going to do is you're going to look for time to learning, like how fast you can actually change something and learn what worked and didn't work, and then go at it again and again and again. And then when you get that one done, you go to the next one. And then the next one and the next one. That's what I've experienced. In addition, of course, to what I was mentioning before, where you actually are enabling the team with the tools and the expectations. So it's not an option to lean into this world, but it's not all or nothing. Try to find a loop that isn't critical today, and then really try to optimize it. That's the approach that I have seen work. It's not about like burn the boats and go here with like mission critical customer facing processes. No, it's not that, at least to start. But that's how I've found companies really, not lose sight of an ambitious future and a possibility, but really start small, but iterate quickly. So you talk about the skills that are required there. We touched on some of these, right? It's the ability to basically lean into the uncertainty, knowing that you're going to get some things right and some things wrong, as long as you're not risking the company with some things you get wrong, and you figure out how to not make that mistake the second time. That's the recipe in my mind to going forward to accelerating compounding learning. And compounding is a word I love, right? That's compound interest. And, in our work, we call compound marketing, but it's about little gains, just a bunch of little gains that really you figure out, and then you compound them quickly. You move through end-to-end loops quickly.
Right.
So I love the concept of systems thinking, and that really, what that practically means is you apply it to a simple end-to-end loop somewhere in your company, and you start to experiment with fundamentally new ways of doing it. And I think that's the best advice and experience that I can offer.
No, I agree. And I think that is such a great example and practical tip for leaders to consider. Now, that prompted me another question about what you said. So we'll not talk about hard skills here, talking more about mindset again and leadership, attitude and traits. Are we really looking at what different traits or attitude we need to have in the workplace to make what you just described happen? For example, you mentioned about testing in a safe space, meaning when a critical part of your process or business, tested, see how it works, and then, as you said, by compound and scaling, rolling
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
But that does require, from a leadership standpoint, to me, an appetite for, even if it's a kind of a low risk, but still an appetite for risk, is an appetite for failing and then learning from failing.
Yeah.
Do you see
Yeah.
that is already happening in organization, or there are some fundamental leadership skills and attitudes that are required to make sure AI will become successful in a way that you just described it?
One of a clear challenge that I see and try to help change perspectives is on risk, right? So oftentimes people don't make a decision, right? And not making a decision is a decision. And not making a decision usually comes with it risk that's maybe just hidden a little bit, but it doesn't mean it's not big. So I guess the way I'd say it is really having a different perspective on risk, to know that like just staying still is in fact often, and especially in today's world where the pace is unprecedented. I know people say that word a lot with every transition. It's just so true. It's part of why I'm so enjoying being back.
There's a reason why people say that, right?
They do, but it is like literally the risk of inaction so far outweighs it. So like, I guess part of it is the job of a leader is to be optimistic, right? Is to be dealer in hope and not in BS. But part of that is bringing that wall in a little closer to make people feel like, we're on the current path. We're going to hit that wall. We're going to hit it sooner. So bringing that wall in closer so you can actually simulate and say, great, this concept of a pre-mortem or a post-mortem.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Like a pre-mortem is like, hey, we're going to be successful, and go out. We're going to be successful in N number of months, quarters, years, whatever the case may be. You say, what caused us to be successful, right? So part of that is pulling in some obstacles and figuring out how we're going to navigate around. So I'm a big fan of that, the concept of a pre-mortem.
Great.
Really like writing in present tense success in the future. And there's different techniques you can use as a leader. But it has to be really placing the weights on the risk that's inherent in not taking action or not taking action quickly enough or bold enough. So those are the things that I see. I find that really fun to take that perspective at a board level, because it's literally like, that's all your perspective as a board member, is not as an operator, is to help the CEO or the leadership team frame risk in the right way, and then frame capital allocation decisions with the lens of risk adjustment, right? And again, a lot of people look to say, okay, I'm a system of record in technology, and clearly AI could erode that, right? If you have data clouds and then AI on top, you could make a case that the systems of record are gonna become less relevant. You could also make the opposite case. So my point is, just sitting there with status quo and letting it roll is in fact a very risky strategy. So being very clear and intentional about capital allocation and risk, where risk lives, is the role of a board. It's the role of a CEO, and getting great at that. Yeah, it does require the ability to assume risk, but most importantly is actually the recovery from the errors or the missteps, right? Bezos is a master at this, right? He says, listen, even the best teams are right about half the time. If you think about it, really, the best product and engineering teams I've been around get it right maybe 60% of the time, maybe. Like most of the time it's less than 50%. That means half the time you're going to be wrong. Okay, great. How do you then take that learning and iterate it into something that's less wrong, right? That's the nature of this work. So that just means you don't get so bent out of shape about being wrong, and part of cultures, like I grew up in Canada, and like there's a less comfort with being wrong, right? It's like, that's what the Valley gets right. It's like, that's the price of admission. That's the admission to the game. That's the ante to play the game of innovation, right? You're going to be wrong. You got to figure out how to learn from it and iterate quickly on the other way through. So those are my perspectives on the skills and the mindsets that are required. to win in this era. And it's never been more so true than in this one, because the pace of change is like, and the slope of the improvements of the underlying models in the tech is like astoundingly unparalleled.
Yeah, that's great. A really great sharing. And that leads me to the final question, because you're already pointing to meaning sustainable culture, meaning you as a leader and many of you operating in an environment is such a fast changing and rapid innovation. Then one day you're a product A, and maybe in a couple of years you're already another product that requires completely different workflow, process, skills, all of that. In that fast changing environment, one thing that sometimes gets sacrificed inside of that is your own company culture, because you need to get, doesn't mean that you have to, but sometimes unfortunately leaders fall into the trap of leading and thinking of you're making compromises of what behaviors are accepted based on the pace they need to take to pivot or to change the business model, etc. And then, as we all know, implication on culture then has an implication anyway on performance. So how do you find this, the right balance between keeping your company alive, innovative, with that sort of a mindset, while on the same time protecting the right behaviors that have support the organization to get performance at least until that moment?
Maybe you frame it slightly differently. Like I actually think that part of what companies need to be really crystal clear on is a culture of velocity. And that's not something that gets sacrificed. There's not trade-off there, right? Between going, moving with velocity and quality. In fact, I think the two go hand in hand in the best companies I've ever been part of. And I use the term velocity very intentionally, not just speed. Velocity is direction times speed. It's literally a physics thing, right? Where it's like, oftentimes people aren't clear. I find what you're describing in the less high performance companies, people chase speed just for its sake, right? And they're not as clear on the direction, right?
Yes.
And it's like you can climb that ladder and get to the top of the ladder and you're finding, okay, I'm on the wrong wall, right? It's like, we're going the wrong direction, right? So I think sometimes slowing down to then eventually speed up requires being clear on direction. And I'm a big fan of setting North Star objectives that are rooted in the physics of the business. So like you actually come back to that problem you're solving, setting very clear direction to say, hey, we're going to solve this problem. This is a big worthy problem in the world that we need to solve. And this is the direction we're going to go. And it's North Star. It's not prescriptive or deterministic. It's probabilistic to say, hey, this is a vision of the world that we see. And this is the direction we're going to go. Then you start to say, okay, how do we work customer back to ensure that we're making speed along that trajectory and we de-risk the journey while maintaining speed. And then we define success not as launching something, but we define success as solving a meaningful problem for that customer on the journey. So to me, a culture that says, hey, we're customer obsessed, we're clear on the direction, and we're going to move as quickly as we can, knowing that we're going to make mistakes along the way and we're going to recover from them quickly. Which to me, that's a culture of the best companies I've ever been a part of, or I have been part of some amazing companies like Google. There's this company, Glean, that's clearly on the path to being a killer application in the workplace. Amazing. And those are hallmarks of these companies. And that's what I'm setting out to do with an amazing team at GrowthLoop, right? We want to move quickly in a direction that's going to solve real problems about growth, real problems of how you engage loyal customers, right? And we're lucky to do it with like the Googles and the Pricelines and the Costcos of the world. And it's amazing, but we're just early on that journey. But, I think velocity is a habit formation that really the best teams have. So I don't view it as a trade-off. I view it as like the thing on the way. So great cultures have it.
Clearly was a provocation, because I really wanted to provoke that conversation that you beautifully explain. And by the way, it sounds like you are really operating, which is something that I do with every single time with a client. You're operating from the right to left thinking, meaning you are really starting from the future and then working backwards versus starting from the current condition. So I think to me, only that explain, why you've been, at least my assertion, why you're being so successful as a leader, because you have the clarity of success, and what the future looks like, and then driving the organization, to get there with clarity. Chris, where people should go if they want to know more about yourself first, and then of course to GrowthLoop?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. That's where I spend most of my time, and I've been really benefited from great conversations that sparked there and that into real life. So people can track me down there. can visit GrowthLoop on the web. So it's been a pleasure to spend a little bit of time with you, Andrea, and it's great to have this conversation. You've got an amazing audience, and it's been an honor to be here.
No, thank you, Chris, for joining me. It was a very, very in-depth conversation. So really like it, and I'm sure the audience will totally appreciate the 45 minutes they've been listening. So thank you, Chris, and of course, good luck with the growth of your company.
Thank you so much, Andrea.